Daniel, I'm completely soaked. I don't know if it's the rain or your touch, but please put it in now. She said those words, and without a sound, he rolled up his dress shirt sleeves. Dawn, a pouring rain shower, a small locker room behind the driving range, wet shirts, a breathless confession, a boss and a subordinate. The taboo moment began at that deserted golf course. How on earth did these two end up spending that night together? Before we dive into their story, if you hit subscribe, and perhaps a night like this might find its way to you too. It goes back a few days. It was the day of the company's quarterly golf retreat. Elena Ross, a 45-year-old sales planning manager at a mid-sized firm, boarded the charter bus with a nervous look on her face. The company's golf outings were part of an unspoken culture. Attendance was mandatory. It was especially impossible to refuse this time, as Daniel O'Connor, the director of sales, was hosting it personally. Elena had been with the company for over 12 years. She was a veteran at her job, but these social events always made her feel awkward and out of place. She had never even held a golf club properly before, yet there she was at 7:00 a.m. standing at the edge of the fairway, facing her first tee shot. "That's not how you hold the grip. Come on, straighten your back." A colleague chuckled. The comments were mixed with laughter, but the thoughtless jokes weighed heavy on her shoulders. Thwack! She hit the ground behind the ball, sending it dribbling off in the wrong direction. Someone burst out laughing. Others awkwardly looked away. Elena forced the corners of her mouth up, pretending she didn't care, and lowered her head. At that moment, a careful voice came from behind her. "It's okay. Everyone starts that way." It was Director Daniel O'Connor. He approached quietly and adjusted her stance. His hand supporting her waist to correct her posture was warm. Seeing her flinch, he offered a slight, reassuring smile. "Relax, I couldn't even hit the ball my first round. I was heavier than couldn't even turn my waist," he joked. It sounded like a quip, but there was sincerity buried in it. Elena nodded slightly. For the first time, she felt a genuine sense of gratitude toward him. His words and the warmth of his fingertips lingered strangely long after he let go. Was it just kindness, or was it something slightly closer? For the entire week after returning to the office, Elena felt heavy. Not physically, but because of the gazes. "Manager Ross, your shoulders look more relaxed after swinging that driver, huh? You didn't hit the ball, but your form looked great standing next to the director." In the break room, the elevator, and before meetings, she had to endure the same teasing remarks. Some said it openly. Others exchanged meaningful glances. The gratitude she felt on the field was turning into embarrassment. So she avoided him. Whenever she saw Daniel coming, she stepped aside or avoided eye contact. Then, on Friday afternoon, just before clocking out, Daniel approached her desk. "Manager Ross, can we talk for a second?" The eyes of her surrounding colleagues instantly locked onto them. Elena grabbed her notebook and followed him into an empty conference room. It was 5:00 p.m. and the late afternoon sun was dimming through the half-drawn blinds. "It's been uncomfortable lately, hasn't it?" Daniel asked directly. Elena kept her head down and nodded silently. "I'm sorry. My help on the field might have been a burden from a subordinate's perspective." He chose his words slowly. Hearing him apologize made Elena's face flush. "No, it wasn't that. I think I just stood out too much." When she forced a smile, he let out a small breath. "Do you plan to keep learning golf?" Elena looked up. It was an unexpected question. "It must have been embarrassing out there. I can help you. The company driving range is empty at dawn. Just short sessions when no one is around." Silence flowed for a moment. Elena hesitated. She worried about more rumors, and frankly, she didn't trust her own feelings. But strangely, the memory of his hand supporting her back kept resurfacing. "Okay, just for a little while at dawn." When she finally agreed, he smiled faintly and nodded. "It'll help with work, too. Confidence in meetings often starts with your swing." It was an excuse. They both knew it. This wasn't just about work. On the way home, Elena checked her phone screen a dozen times. No message came, yet she found herself waiting for one. Gratitude was turning into cautious interest, and interest was blooming into a small flutter of excitement. 5:00 a.m. Elena carefully opened the door to the company's indoor range. The fluorescent lights hummed over the green mats. In the corner stretching was Daniel. He was already there. "You're early." "Habit. It's best here when no one else is around." An awkward tension hung between them. Since the conference room they hadn't spoken, but as agreed, Elena was here. Daniel silently handed her a practice iron, and Elena gripped it with clumsy hands. "Straighten your back, keep your wrists still. Grip a little lower." He moved behind her. She could feel his breath on the nape of her neck. They were close enough that she could hear him inhale. Relax your arms just like that. His hands covered hers on the club. The moment his fingertips brushed the inside of her elbows, Elena's shoulders trembled slightly. It's okay, this is good. Ah yes, I'll focus. Elena blurred the end of her sentence, staring at the ground, but her nerves were entirely focused on her back. He didn't speak again, but his hands slowly moved down to correct her hips. It was ostensibly to fix her posture, but the movement was slow and natural enough to blur the line of propriety. Elena unconsciously held her breath, then exhaled deeply. At the dizzying sensation of his touch, she turned her head to look at him. Their eyes met for barely 2 seconds, but in that short moment, they knew exactly what the other was thinking without saying a word. Let's try hitting one, Daniel said, looking away first. Okay. Elena reset her stance and swung. The club brushed the mat, sending the ball flying, but the warmth of him standing behind her lingered on her skin longer than the sound of the swing. That day's lesson left more marks on her emotions than on her technique. It was a Sunday morning. They had agreed to play a quiet round together, a personal outing, not a company event. No prying eyes. The dawn rain seemed to have stopped with the morning sun, but storm clouds began to gather again without warning. The first drops fell around the 6th fairway, and by the time they reached the clubhouse, it was pouring. The spacious lounge was empty. Even the staff seemed to have retreated to the break room. It was just the two of them, in the silence. It's really coming down, Elena said, shaking out her damp hair. Daniel leaned his wet golf bag against the wall and handed her a small towel. Are you okay? Yes. I didn't get too wet. She wiped her neck, but her polo shirt was already clinging to her back. Elena sat carefully on the sofa, staring out the window. The rain drummed a rhythm on the roof. Daniel sat next to her, catching his breath. Elena? Yes. Why didn't you ever get married? It was a sudden question, but Elena wasn't surprised. In this weather, in this quiet space, it sounded natural. I was engaged once, but it didn't work out. Bad timing, wrong person. She spoke calmly, but the words carried the weight of time past. You said you were divorced, right, Daniel? Yeah, the marriage didn't last long. I used work as an excuse, and we lost each other. Daniel idly spun the water bottle in his hand. His voice was low and quiet, but Elena felt the regret lingering in it. People are strange, she mused. In golf, you can't use force, or you mess up the swing. But in relationships, if you don't put in the force effort, it collapses. A brief chuckle passed between them. But the laughter didn't last long. Silence returned, but it no longer felt awkward. Daniel turned to look at her as she fixed her wet hair. His gaze was no longer that of a superior looking at a subordinate. Elena felt it too. The angle of his eyes had changed. Outside, the rain was still pouring, drenching the golf course. But the air between them was shifting a tension that didn't need words, was slowly, clearly permeating the room. A few days later, an executive round was scheduled as an extension of a company athletic event. This was official. Elena and Daniel were paired in the same group. Thanks to the lessons, Elena's swing had stabilized. Instead of a panicked tee shot, she swung her driver with confidence. Wow, look at Manager Ross. Who gave you lessons? Did you join a country club? E. The colleagues' comments were closer to suspicion than praise. Elena tried to laugh it off. She knew that from now on, people would be watching the relationship more than her skills. On the way back to the clubhouse, Daniel was unusually quiet. He didn't sit next to her on the bus and deliberately sat at the opposite end of the table during lunch. Elena couldn't understand. Was he distancing himself? Or was the distance always there, and she had imagined the closeness? The next day at the office, he offered only a curt nod. Manager Ross, did you review that document? Yes, I emailed it this morning. Clean professional, not a single crack in his armor. The face that had smiled at her, the hands that had fixed her posture, they were gone. Elena sat at her desk, scrolling her mouse aimlessly over a blueprint file. Daniel's eyes, the touch at the dawn practice range, the silence in the rainy clubhouse. Was I wrong? Did I cross a line? Or was there never a line and I just assigned meaning to nothing? She realized for the first time how large the emotion of anxiety could be. The feelings were there, but fear made one person step back, leaving the other shaking alone on the boundary. The confrontation, that dawn, Elena hesitated for a long time in front of the practice range door. For the past few days, Daniel had been noticeably cautious. No personal chats, no shared glances. She opened the door. The range was quiet, and Daniel was hitting balls on the mat. You're here. He turned his head slightly, a short greeting devoid of emotion. Elena grabbed an iron feeling like she had swallowed a stone. Your grip looks fine. Your hands must be used to it now. His tone was polite but painfully distant. He didn't approach her. He didn't touch her shoulder. Elena swung. The ball flew well, but her heart was heavy. She couldn't stand it. Director, you seem to be avoiding me lately. Daniel stopped his swing. His hands paused at the top of the backswing, slowly came down. He answered without turning his head. I didn't want to make things uncomfortable for you. I'm not sure if this is right. His voice was firm but laced with hesitation. Since that day, I kept thinking I might be crossing a line. Elena looked at him silently. She realized how distant a single sentence could make a person feel. In the space where he stepped back, words like caution, responsibility, and reality took hold. But it made Elena's heart more complicated. Watching someone retreat not because they don't like you, but because they like you too much, is far more painful. It was a Friday night team dinner. Elena hesitated but decided to go. The drinking party was standard, but as people left one by one, eventually only Daniel and Elena remained at the bar. Outside, a spring rain began to fall quietly. The sound of rain on the awning shook their emotions. Elena stared at him and spoke in a small voice. I kept thinking about it since that day. Your hands, the dawn air, that quiet practice range. Daniel put down his glass without a word. His eyes wavered, but his lips remained sealed. Elena took a breath. If we're wrong, do we have to keep avoiding each other forever? At that, Daniel looked up. Their eyes met. I've been thinking about it too, constantly. A long silence followed his short answer. Then Daniel stood up. Want to go to the clubhouse to get out of the rain? Elena nodded. They walked out into the night without an umbrella. The rain grew heavier. By the time they reached the facility, they were soaked. The main lights were off, but the door to the small locker room was slightly ajar. Daniel entered first, Elena followed. A narrow, dark space, humid air, wet shirts, held breath. They looked at each other, then slowly moved closer. He reached out first, cupping Elena's cheek. She leaned into his hand, and their lips met. Lightly at first, then hesitating, then deeply crashing together. Her shirt was wet, clinging to her skin, revealing every contour. Daniel's fingertips slid down her spine to her waist. Her shirt buttons came undone one by one. As his lips moved down her neck, Elena let out a small gasp. At that moment, she whispered slowly, Daniel, I'm completely soaked. I don't know if it's the rain or your touch, but please put it in now. The words melted his long hesitation. Daniel inhaled sharply, pulled her waist in tight, and they spoke no more. Hands brushed over wet clothes, lips locked, and breath tangled roughly in the air. That night, no one stopped the moment. They allowed each other's warmth. Outside, the rain never ceased. The glass of the clubhouse steamed up with their heat. It was desire, it was the warmth born of loneliness, and it was a midnight answer that crossed a long-held taboo. A few days later, Elena felt strange gazes in the hallway. I see Manager Ross and the director together a lot lately. Her numbers are up, and I hear talk of a promotion. The vibe totally changed after that round. Whispers behind coffee cups. Elena knew there was truth in those sneers. The memory of that night remained deep in her heart, but reality was making that memory heavier. She double-checked every email, printed documents twice. She realized even a small mistake could now become fodder for gossip. Just before leaving work, Daniel called her. Can we talk? Not the conference room. Not the practice range. He was waiting in the hallway near the emergency exit stairs. They stood side by side. The sunset bled through the window blinds, and his expression was strangely hardened. Elena, I think we should stop here. The sentence was short, but the meaning was heavy and clear. You know what I mean. The eyes in the company. I'm fine, but I'm worried you'll get hurt more. She lowered her head. She understood why he said it. But the words felt like a cold knife, not because he had given up, but because he was a man who still loved her, trying to protect her. Yes, I understand. She didn't look up. She turned around without seeing his face. They both knew the words weren't sincere, but in that moment they had to endure it. Daniel watched her back for a long time as she disappeared through the emergency door. The words were cut, the bodies were apart, but the feelings remained unfinished. Saturday morning. Elena woke up before her alarm. She had no plans, no promises, but she quietly grabbed her golf bag and left the house. The wind was unusually calm. The air was clear. It felt like a day saying everything would be okay. The golf course she arrived at was strangely quiet. Her name wasn't on the tee sheet, nor was his. Yet they appeared side by side, naturally carrying their clubs to the first tee. No greetings, no eye contact. But just being there was enough. Elena's first shot flew straight. Daniel nodded silently. She walked to the next tee without a word. They played 18 holes in near silence. Only the wind, the sound of shoes on grass, and the strike of the ball echoed. They walked half a step apart on the fairways. They avoided eyes on the greens. The distance was sad yet strangely comfortable. As she cleaned her clubs at the last hole, Elena spoke quietly. "So now we go back to just boss and subordinate." Daniel turned to look at her. He didn't speak, but his eyes held both the conviction that they should and the emotion that he didn't want to. He nodded slightly. That single motion ended the conversation. Walking back to the clubhouse, they went in different directions. Elena to the parking lot, Daniel to the admin building. But after a few steps, she looked back. His retreating back, the hand adjusting his bag, the pause in his stride. She realized then, even without words, we will remember each other. They remained director and manager in emails. But the person whose name they couldn't call out remained in their hearts. Sunday afternoon. Elena went to the practice range alone. It was the most familiar space to soothe her cluttered mind. Hit, retrieve, hit again. In that simple repetition, she tried to empty her thoughts. But with every ball, Daniel's tone, his hands and his eyes that night returned. Suddenly, a familiar voice came from behind. "Manager Ross, still working hard, I see." She turned. Daniel was standing there, a cap pulled low. It had been a while, but it wasn't awkward at all. He stood in the bay next to hers, and Elena quietly took her stance again. After a few shots, he spoke, looking like he had hesitated for a long time. "I thought about it since that day. That expression, those words." Elena lowered her club and looked at him. "And yet, I keep wanting to see you." It was a single line that showed how much he had been holding back. Silence flowed briefly, then Daniel smiled gently. "Shall we hit some balls together?" At that moment, the tension in Elena's shoulders released and a warmth returned to her expression. They walked to the end of the range together. The wind blew gently and their shadows slowly overlapped. Right now, they might be boss and subordinate. Some eyes might still be sharp, but they decided to walk together again. This time they wouldn't hesitate. They wouldn't avoid the feelings. Now their rounds were no longer about work, but time just for them. The wind on the next hole would surely feel a little different. Their new beginning started quietly but clearly.